Thanks for listening to Uncle Sam's Soccer Podcast, keeping you up to date with the latest in American soccer. And don't forget to subscribe.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Uncle Sam's Soccer Podcast. I'm Steven Jodarand.
And I'm Jake Watroba.
And on today's episode, we're back and soccer is back. The National Women's Soccer League has record eyeballs. FC Dallas is going through a COVID mess. We got third degree Buzz Carrick to talk about that. And the best thing of all is we're back. Soccer is back, Jake.
You're welcome, everybody. We're back. You can follow the show on Twitter at UncSamSoccerPod. We always appreciate your comments and questions, so continue to send them in. And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Now, let's get to today's show.
Jake, well, we're sitting in front of a microphone. You're drinking. I'm dictating the show. Life is what? Somewhat normal?
Can you hear that pour? Can you hear that pour of me pouring myself another glass of bourbon? Yeah, we're back. It feels good to be back. It's been 2 months, 3 months, I think.
Yes. Listeners,
I'm not even sure.
You know, I don't even know. I sat in traffic for the first time in today, driving back from my family in Milwaukee to Madison for the first time in like 6 months. It was the strangest feeling. I'm like, holy crap, there's traffic. Why? Why am I sitting in traffic? I haven't done this in 6 months. Strange. Listeners, please be safe out there. COVID is still around. Wear a mask. We're on, hashtag wear a mask. And Jake, let's begin with this. What have you been up to, and what have you been paying attention to any soccer?
I watched the Prem.
Christian Pulisic.
Seen a little, of course. Love Captain America. I have caught a little bit of the NWSL.
Oh yeah, you've been enjoying the first sports league back in America.
I've caught a little bit here and there.
It's caught some people's attention. I'm reading from World Soccer Talk, everybody's favorite TV ratings website. From talking about the TV ratings from June 22nd through the 30th, the National Women's Soccer League Challenge Cup, quote, kicked off last weekend. Defending champions North Carolina Courage defeated the Portland Thorns FC 2-1 before a television audience of 572,000 on CBS, largest audience ever for a NWSL match. Pretty impressive, no?
Well, that's definitely impressive. I think MLS would enjoy those numbers if they were to get ratings like that this over the next couple of weeks with the new MLS is Back tournament.
Listeners, how much have you been paying attention to the NWSL? Obviously, the Challenge Cup taking place in Utah. For a large part, it's been pretty good. I mean, have you had any question marks regarding like just the players' fitness, watching them? Obviously, in watching the return of the Bundesliga, it was quite obvious that the players needed some time to get their legs underneath them.
Yeah, I mean, I thought those first few Bundesliga matches, at least maybe the first week or two, they were brutal, I thought, to say the least. I saw a lot of people freaking out about, oh, soccer's back. Look at it. Like, yeah, it's really great watching Dusseldorf lose 5-0 to Leverkusen or whatever. Like, yeah, that's really fun. No thanks. No. But no, I mean, the couple of goals I've seen in NWSL, I mean, the run of play looks all right. I mean, look, there's still rust that needs to be knocked off with a lot of these players. I mean, they've had a layoff where they just weren't practicing at all. They didn't have a run up to this, and now it's kind of been sped up to where, you have a couple of weeks to just get ready before the regular season starts, because these leagues are trying to jam as many games as they can in as possible.
Sure.
Just to make up for missed time.
Yep, absolutely. And listeners, MLS's Back tournament set to kick off July 8th with Orlando City taking on Inter Miami at 8 p.m. Eastern, followed by Nashville versus the Fire at 10:30 Eastern. But that might be moved as 5 players test positive with COVID. Paul Tenario tweeted out Sunday afternoon, reporting with Sam Skasel, Nashville FC had 5 players test positive since arriving in Orlando on Friday per sources. One upon arrival, 4 more since. Last 4 need to be confirmed by follow-ups. And we're going to talk a lot more with Buzz Carrick of Third Degree regarding COVID, but with FC Dallas. Obviously, FC Dallas has been the team of conversation in the recent week or so. But, Jake, before we get to that conversation with Buzz, how excited are you for MLS's back tournament? The MLS
I'm not
is
sure.
Back tournament.
I'm not sure. On one hand, I am excited because sports are back in this country, but on the other hand, I think this tournament and this format is kind of wonky in that we also have 2 teams that have a sizable number of confirmed COVID-19 cases. And what does that mean for this tournament? Is that going to change is that going to change who's playing in this tournament? Are these 2 teams going to have to back out? We don't know yet. So it's kind of a, wait and see type of thing for me. What about you?
I'm excited, but I'm also very hesitant to say I'm excited because I'm not too sure people are going to tune in. I really don't. I don't think America's going to watch. You can talk about how Americans are deprived of sports, but how many people in Colorado are more concerned about the NBA's return with the Denver Nuggets, that's a few weeks away, versus the return of the Colorado Rapids?
I would think there's probably more people who are concerned about the return of the Nuggets and the Rapids. I would agree with you on that. I think that's at least that's where I think you were going with that.
Yeah. I just think more people are concerned with the long-term future of their teams. If you're in Boston, you have concern regarding the Red Sox, right? MLB is somewhat back. Yeah, the MLB botched this from the beginning, but they're coming back. It's a shortened season. Any team can be good for 2 months. Right? Baseball's a marathon, not a sprint. So if you have a team that gets hot early, you could have a surprise team in the playoffs for MLB. The NFL, you got news left and right. It's America's league. People are going to tune into that. The NBA, the NHL, they got playoffs coming back. What is MLS going to do to captivate our attention? And the big concern, before we get to Buzz, Jake, is as much as we're all excited for MLS's back tournament, people are going to want to know what the TV ratings are. It's great that the NWSL did such a huge number. But the Premier League, after averaging 354,000 in the league's first week back on NBCSN, it fell 29%. And this is according to World Soccer Talk. I'm not convinced that people are going to tune in. And I think the excitement around this tournament is not there due to the COVID outbreak, which we'll just talk about. I keep saying that. And due to larger issues larger in society. And then lastly, the quality of play. I think these teams haven't played for 9 months. Let's be honest. Yeah, they had 2 regular season games. They had some sort of preseason, and now they're having another preseason. MLS hasn't been, relevant in 9 months? Like, since MLS Cup?
No, Steven, you're right. Although I disagree. I think they will do okay with the ratings. I think the American sports audience needs something to watch at night.
9 a.m. games. You think those are going to help?
No, but I think games at 7 and 9:30 at night, or I guess 8 and 10:30 at night will help. And I think people will watch. And I think there's degenerate gamblers who want something to gamble on at night, and I think they'll tune in.
And now you can say to the girlfriend, to the wife, "Hey, there's sports on. I gotta watch my team." Think about how many people in local markets like, "Oh, I'm a Colorado Rapids fan, honey." Since when? I've always been. I just haven't really told you about him. Who are they playing? I gotta go. Game's about to kick off.
Seattle United. I don't know. One of the Uniteds.
Seattle United. Yeah. Well, City FC United. Anyway, listeners, let's get to Buzz Carrick.
Joining us right now is the founder of Third Degree. It's Buzz Carrick. Third Degree is an independent soccer news source for North Texas. Founded in 1997, Buzz covers all things soccer in the Dallas Metroplex. Follow Third Degree on Twitter at Third Degree Net. They've been in the thick of things lately. Buzz, how are you doing?
I'm good. Much better than FC Dallas is doing, in fact.
That's an understatement.
Yeah.
Well, FC Dallas, not the biggest club in Major League Soccer, but probably the club most talked about the last week or so. Just kind of catch us up and the listeners on where things are at Sunday, July 5th.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Well, if we want to go through the timeline, we can do that, but non-specifically of the timeline, right now they have had 10 players since they've arrived in Orlando test positive at one point or another over the course of the week, and they're now on day 6 of lockdown. All the players that have tested positive are in a different wing of the hotel from the rest, but they're all basically in their rooms around the clock. They meet on Zoom, and they haven't trained since Monday. Monday's the oh dang it, what day is today? The 29th. They haven't trained since the 29th of June. And you know they're in a difficult straits, and their leadership is trying to figure out the best course forward for them, and the MLS is trying to figure out if they can keep them in the tournament. And right now, FC Dallas can still field a team. They have 18 players in Orlando that are not testing positive, that are negative. The players that have been hit with positive scores are a mix of starters and reserves, and it's a mix positionally speaking too. So they have coverage all over the field and can still field probably 9 out of 11 starters or players that are usual starters can still be fielded. So the big questions are going to be, when are they going to be allowed to train again and or play again? Luchi Gonzalez today is really worried about his player healthy. They keep talking about that number one priority. But on top of that, it's like if he can't walk out of the hotel after weeks of quarantine and play. You know, he feels he needs time to train. And way back in the day, he used to say 3 weeks. A couple months ago, he said 3 weeks of training, and now they're inside of 2 weeks and not training. So it's still way up in the air what's going to happen with FC Dallas.
Now, Buzz, I just want to clarify something here, just in your last, answer to Stephen's opening question. Is the entire team being quarantined in the separate wing of the hotel, or is it just the players that are being quarantined that tested positive for COVID-19?
Yeah, the entire team is being quarantined in their rooms. They moved the players that were positive to a separate wing. So the players that were negative are still in their original wing, but all staff and all players are all confined to their rooms, and they're only meeting on Zoom. And you can see on Instagram, various guys on their balconies singing to the gooses in the lake and playing music and singing back and forth to each other as they try and entertain themselves, because they've been in lockdown for 6 days now. So it's got to be boring as heck, particularly for young guys. There was a joke where one of Cobra's gaming accounts got suspended. And he was all mad about it, because it was the only game he says he plays. But they're trying to make do in those circumstances. I mean, they still do like in-room fitness exercises. Their trainers bringing them stuff to be doing and trying. But I mean, how much can you do in your room? So right. They're doing their best, but it's got to be extraordinarily difficult circumstances.
Are the players who are sick showing signs? Like, are they running some sort of fever or feeling sick, or are they asymptomatic?
Most are asymptomatic. I've heard of some headaches, and I've heard of some body ache kind of situation. They sort of kept one of the younger players awake a little bit, but that's really it. I mean, these guys are, no one is completely free of danger anymore. We've seen in the press people that have been young and healthy that have died. So, I'm not going to say they're without danger. But these guys are relatively young and healthy. And so,
right.
So far, luckily, knock on wood, no one has had any bad symptoms that have filtered to me. Now, of course, I'm not there. I'm only getting information from my sources, because the team media-wise is on lockdown. Unless you're a big national media, they're not giving us access to anybody. So, as far as I know, everything's asymptomatic, and everything's and players could have, even that had been positive, been negative, I suppose now. I don't have that information, but I just know that 10 players and one coach have been positive, and there were 3 that were positive tests before they even left town.
So Grant Wall had this tweet Sunday afternoon talking about how, I guess, the saving grace, if you want to say that, is that the virus isn't being caught from within the bubble rather than it's being brought, I guess, to the bubble, in the sense that a lot of these people are catching it from the cities that they're coming from, in the case FC Dallas, Frisco. Is there concern among other players or within the FC Dallas squad of player safety? Am I going to catch it? Am I going to give it to players on the opposing team or all that?
Not specifically, I don't think, beyond the obvious of, they can't really train. So that means, with the lockdown situation, I don't think anyone's worried about giving it to anybody else at this point. They definitely, Texas has had a lot of cases, of course. But the FC Dallas had one case there way back on June 3rd. So they already were pretty self-aware of the situation. But yet here in Texas, you could go to restaurants and you could go to bars. So it's hard to know where the exposure came from. It's not like you had, 5 20-year-olds go to a bar and they all tested positive. And nothing like that has happened. It's all been trickling in the sense that it's clear that somebody got the team exposed. They had 2 tests they had 2 tests positive a week before they left, just about a little over a week before they left. And one of those players was later on cleared to train. Now, that can't happen without multiple negative tests afterwards. So one of those players was allowed to come back to training and one of them was not. And that player never traveled, and that player is still in Dallas. So upon arrival, that's the key trick, is that they showed up on the Saturday that they traveled, the 27th. And the 28th, they held their first training session, and it was on that day because they arrived late on the evening of the 27th. It's on the day of the 28th that they got their first results and had these 2 positive players. And one of those 2 players was in training, took part in training. So, but the problem with this virus is that there's about a 5-day, maybe even a 7-day window from exposure to when you test positive. There can be. So for them to pop 2 guys on the day they arrived, 1 guy the next day, 3 guys the next day, it's clear that their exposure happened before they got to Orlando. It's something that somehow happened in their training in Dallas. So whether guys that have, since then, they had a day where they had no positive results, but then they had 3 more players and a staffer, and then they had another day where they didn't have any, then they had another positive. So probably were just that last positive case on July 3rd. That might be the first player that got exposed in Orlando by all the other players that were, of course, positive on arrival. But it's really hard to say where the breakdown happened with FC Dallas. It's, there were a couple players had posted Instagrams of, going for a walk with their dog. Do we know of anybody going to dinner? No, I haven't heard anything about them being reckless, nothing like that. So, it's very possible with Dallas being Dallas. They've had a record number of cases for the last, every day is a new record here of cases. So, Frisco we count that as part of Dallas. It's not the same county, but it's all one city. So, it's a mess, and it's hard to know what went wrong.
Now, Buzz, I want to ask you this, because you've been pretty plugged in with this whole situation with FC Dallas, and obviously FC Dallas's opening group stage match against the Whitecaps, that's been postponed. Now, through your investigating, the people you've talked to, was there any consideration within the club or MLS to pull FC Dallas out of Orlando that you know of?
Well, Luchi Gonzalez, the Dallas's head coach, just in case people don't know, Luchi specifically said on his local radio show here that he was already in discussions and is also continuously in discussions with his ownership and with his technical director, Andre Zanata, about what they should do. And there at the point he said that, and he reiterated that today on a couple of interviews he did. It's not to be determined yet. I'm assuming that Major League Soccer is going to be involved in that conversation. I assume that the Hunts and Lucci says the Hunts and will, in the end, decide whether their players need to be protected. I don't think anything's been decided. Now, it's been 2 days since I've learned of a positive test, so I haven't heard anything today. Yesterday, they were negative. So if they get a couple of more days of negative, they're probably going to start to feel really confident that they've clamped it down. And by delaying the first game, they had 2 weeks before they were going to play their next game, from a couple of days ago, which is enough time to isolate that whole time. Then, of course, you get into a competitive question where Lucci feels he needs to start training. So it's just going to be a question of, as we've said, there's a 5 to 7 day window, right? An incubation window. And they arrived on the 27th, which was last Saturday. So you're looking at you're just now over a week. So any exposures that happen on arrival within that first 2 days that they did train, those guys were going to pop today, tomorrow. So like the next 2 or 3 days, I think are going to be really huge because we need to get past that 5 to 7 day span from those training sessions. So if they can get through the next 2-3 days without more pops, more positive tests, then I think they're going to have it caught. And I'm not a doctor, of course. This is just my reading of the situation. So the next, as I say, 2-3 days will be critical for FC Dallas to determine whether they can keep going in this tournament or not. Keep going, get started in this tournament.
Yeah, so this is a curious thought that Jake and I have at least had off the mic conversation, is whether or not these MLS clubs made the mistake of traveling too late to Orlando. So if you did have these cases, that you had more than plenty of time to put everybody in lockdown, in the quarantine, and then still have the time to train, because FC Dallas have a massive disadvantage now. And it's a team in which Pax and Pomical kind of said, look, we're here to win. Lucci wants to win. Team is built to be competitive, a team to cause some sort of noise, to cause headaches. I mean, obviously they pushed, the MLS champs, Seattle Sounders, to the brink last year in the opening round of the playoffs. So do you think FC Dallas and a bunch of other teams are making the mistake of traveling too late to Orlando?
Well, the win mentality is ingrained into this young team. They improved their team from last year. So they legitimately think they have a shot to compete in the playoffs this year, and they legitimately think they have a shot at this tournament, particularly because they're young and they have depth with young players. They're a good balanced team. They're not a top-heavy team. So that's legitimately, I think, in their favor, that they think they got a shot. The testing thing and the isolation thing, did they make a mistake? My opinion, and again, I'm going to reiterate that I'm not a doctor. My opinion was that you needed a 2-week isolation either at home or in Orlando. You needed to have a 2-week quarantine lockdown before you came, or you needed to come earlier and do that here, because now FC Dallas is being forced to do that as they're running out of time. They should have done it so that they could have come out of a quarantine and had 3 weeks of training in Orlando. So however you wanted to do it, come to Orlando 2 weeks earlier with 5 weeks out from your first game, so you can quarantine for 2 weeks and then have 3 weeks of training, or quarantine at home for 2 weeks and then come and have 3 weeks in training. Because it's clear that their exposure wasn't from travel. The exposure happened before they left. So the failure, now whose failure that is, FC Dallas, Major League Soccer, the protocols, I have no idea. It's just my take that that's their failure, was the failure to completely quarantine for 2 weeks prior to leaving.
Yeah, that's a difficult decision, and I guess hindsight's always 20/20. So now we can have the opportunity to be like,
of course,
they should have done this, that. But I guess if here's the big, obviously you have the National Women's Soccer League in play. I don't know how much the NBA, the NFL, MLB, NHL are paying attention to them. I guarantee you they're paying attention to what happened to FC Dallas and what's going on in Orlando with Major League Soccer.
Well, I made the point today that the Hunts, as owners of the Chiefs, obviously are going to have some NFL people paying attention to how this goes. And there are other NFL owners in this league. So I called it a pressure point this morning on Twitter. I imagine that it's a pressure point, that the NFL, this needs to go well, because the NFL's who admittedly the NFL's kind of got some fingers in the MLS pie. Let's be honest, right? So
Yeah,
they're going to be
absolutely.
watching how this goes. I mean, even it's different than NBA, right? It's outside. It's got bigger rosters, right? So I think the NFL probably is watching even this MLS more than they would watch the NBA, for example. So a lot of eyes on this, to be honest. And I still think FC Dallas can salvage this. They might not be gangbusters because they're not going to get enough training time, but if they get through the next couple of days and keep it locked down, they're going to be bored as hell. But I think they can get it contained.
Now, Buzz, final question here before we let you go. You mentioned that Lucci said he preferred to have 3 weeks of training before playing the first match. You just alluded to the fact that we're probably, a day, maybe 2, maybe 3 days before FC Dallas is over this hump as it relates to COVID-19 as the players quarantine in their hotel rooms. As we record this, July 15th, Sunday night, July 5th, Sunday night, do you expect them to take the field Wednesday, July 15th against the Seattle Sounders?
I do. What the things I'm hearing are that, the guys are obviously not real happy with the situation player wise. They're kind of unhappy being stuck in their rooms. But, the fact there's been a couple of days where I haven't heard of any tests and they seem to be negative. And again, I haven't heard about today, but, I feel like this hurdle's been crossed. And I think that they now have a week and 3 days before they play. That's, when you combine that with a couple of negative days on the front, that's enough time. I think they have to have, I think it's 2 negative tests before they can get cleared to resume some training. Now they're probably going to be more cautious than that, but I'm optimistic. We'll see. As they say, and as you just alluded to again, it's if they get through the next 2 or 3 days, then they'll have a week of that they can be still relatively isolated and get some training in. I think they'll be all right.
Yeah. Well, Buzz, we appreciate you taking the time out of your Sunday night talking with us regarding FC Dallas and COVID. Unfortunately, we wish to have you on with better circumstances, obviously with Dallas maybe making a deeper run in the Cup. But was there anything else you wanted to add? And let the listeners plug wherever we can find your awesome work and your podcast or your articles.
Well, thirddegree.net is the website where we've been this is our 23rd season covering FC Dallas. The podcast has been around for a couple of years. It's just called Third Degree the Podcast. I know, branding and all that. So you can find it in any of your podcast or type scenarios. It's all over the podcast systems. We're on Twitter and Instagram and stuff too. The one last thing I would add is that from some of the various people I've talked to, I've heard really, really positive things about Lucci Gonzalez and Andre Zanata, the club's technical director, in terms of interaction with the players while they're down there, talking with them, talking with their families, and making everybody feel confident. So I want to give some love to those 2 guys because I have been hearing really positive things. And I'm quite convinced, based on what Lucci has said and what I hear, that there is definitely a dialogue going on with the ownership about the right tack, and the health of the players is being trumpeted as the most important thing. So we're going to see what happens in the next couple of days. It's going to be interesting whichever way it goes.
Great. Thanks, Buzz.
You're welcome.
Big shout out, big thank you to Buzz for joining the episode. Wow. Jake, this is complicated. I mean, there's really nothing to be said now after listening to Buzz, as FC Dallas just waits, and we can speculate as much as we want. But I think, as I mentioned during our conversation with Buzz, it's like information is just going to change so quickly that we could be looking at a scenario where by Tuesday, a bunch of other teams have COVID outbreaks, and the conversation regarding the MLS back tournament is completely different than it was tonight.
Well, yeah, I think Buzz said it best. I mean, FC Dallas is staring at the next 2 or 3 days that are probably going to make or break this tournament for them. If they get a bunch of negative tests here the next couple of days, it's probably the show goes on for FC Dallas. But if they have some more positive tests with the players who haven't tested positive yet, you might be looking at FC Dallas having to pulled themselves out of the tournament. And what does that mean for them? Is that just 3 losses, that 9 missed points for FC Dallas? I mean, that's crucial in the standings, especially considering that we're probably, assuming the season goes on and is not stopped again, 9 missed points in an abbreviated schedule. That's a pretty big hole to dig yourself out of.
You know what 9 points was last year? Like,
tell me what 9 points was last year.
9 points worthwhile in a full regular season is the difference between.
Wait, let me guess. 2nd and 7th. Because it's not first. It's not first and second in the West, because I think LAFC cleared everybody by like 15 points or whatever.
It's 48 and 56. So 56 points for Seattle Sounders and 48 points for FC Dallas. I mean, you're looking at. Obviously, I doubt they would have some sort of home and away. I don't know. The playoff system might be completely different with MLS, but you're looking at a swing of seedings from home field advantage, quote unquote home field, whatever that means, to being the team that's traveling everywhere.
Yeah, like I said, 9 points in an abbreviated schedule. That's a big hole to dig yourself out of. And case in point with you, just the point you just made just now is that's the difference between finishing 7th in the Western Conference and having your first 2 matches in the playoffs at home. So that's big.
Yep. And I guess it really boils down to wait and see what happens. MLS is wanting to get this thing kicked off. Yeah, MLS has a tricky situation here. If FC Dallas is able to not have any more positive case in the next 2 days, MLS will be able to sidestep this controversy and focus on the games that are being played, obviously because the first game is July 8th. And what will the conversation be nationally speaking? The games at hand rather than FC Dallas. And Jake, you are distracting me as we're wrapping up here because you're pouring yourself some Maker's Mark.
How did you know?
Because I can see it in the video.
All right, this podcast has been sponsored by Maker's Mark. So
if Maker's Mark wants to sponsor this podcast,
we're open for discussions on that sponsorship deal.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Anyway, I'll give you the final word before we wrap here.
Well, hopefully things don't go side. I mean, they kind of have gone sideways for FC Dallas, but hopefully they don't go any more sideways than they have, and hopefully they have a few negative results that gets players back in the field. Hopefully things with Nashville. Hopefully it's just limited to these 4 or 5 players that have tested positive. Hopefully there isn't any more outbreak amongst the club, and hopefully we can get on with this tournament as planned, and we will have soccer and most importantly sports to watch. So we can kind of get away from our normal lives and escape COVID-19 and everything else going on in the world.
Absolutely. Listeners, follow us at Uncle Sam Soccer Pod, at Jake Watroba, at Steve Jotter. And question of the day, how are you doing? What have you been up to? What's on your mind? Are you excited for MLS is back? Have you been paying attention to the National Women's Soccer League? What about the Premier League? Christian Pulisic, he's been doing well. I know Mr. Jake here is a Chelsea fan. You've enjoyed Christian Pulisic of recent. It's been pretty damn important to Frank Lampard.
I didn't realize how good Christian Pulisic was until this last week and a half. He has looked world. I'm gonna say it. I'm gonna say it right now.
Oh, I already know where you're going.
He's looked world class.
Damn.
He has looked.
There you go. Bombshell. World class. Christian Pulisic. Also, we'll be talking more about the Americans abroad in probably the next 2 episodes. That said, enjoy MLS is back. Until next time.